Talking Buffalo Bills, Buffalo Sabres, and maybe a little bit of wrestling today with my buddy Maniac from Trainwreck Sports. Coming up right now on Talking Buffalo.
Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo. With your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, guys, what is going on? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you very much, as always, for watching, for listening, for following, for subscribing. I appreciate y'all very much. This is our Tuesday show. I'm joined right now by my buddy Maniac, at Zach Sheldon on Twitter from Trainwreck Sports. I would say long time no talk, but the reality is I was just on Trainwreck tonight, literally maybe an hour or so ago. Man, what's going on? How you doing?
We're podcast ships passing in the night, Pat. No, appreciate you having me on. I think, again, similar to you, this is my, third appearance potentially on the show? I think this is my first on the modern or the, the new Talking Buffalo set, the awesome, background and everything. So I'm excited to be here, man.
I'm glad to have you, dude. Like I said, if you haven't checked it out, make sure you go check out Trainwreck Sports. I did Trainwreck tonight with them. We talked some Bills, some Sabres, some wrestling, kind of what we're going to do to some extent, at least, on this show as well. It's a good time, man. I'll tell you what, 300, I think you're at like 331 episodes now with Trainwreck tonight. If nothing else, and I've always given you guys credit for this, and I will continue to, you bring the fun to podcasting. I like the fact, if nothing else, that you guys always seem like you're having a genuinely legitimate good time, even if it is a grind. And I know that podcasting and all the work that goes along with it, video stuff, it can become a real grind. But you and the whole crew over at Trainwreck, you do a really good job of just showing the fun. You know what I mean? Like it is fun to watch you guys do what you do, and you could just tell that you're having a good time when you're doing it.
Well, that's the whole thing, right? Like whether you're eating at Imperial, with your guest Tim Graham, Mike Harrington, anyone, Matthew Fairburn, anything like that. You wouldn't do those things if ultimately at the end of the day you weren't getting fun out of them, right? So when we're doing the podcast or when we're ever doing an episode, I mean, if we're not having fun, how are you going to have fun listening, right?
Yeah, that is a good point. Just ran into you in person actually not too long ago either. We were both we went up to Wingnuts, new one in Amherst. We went to check out Matt Perino and Ryan Talbot, their Shout Buffalo Football podcast. Shout out to them, by the way. They do a really good job with that live stuff. Let me ask you this. I feel like it might be a rhetorical question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So you do a lot of shows, in your home studio. You guys also do a lot of stuff on location. Do you prefer doing shows like in a quiet, comfortable setting like you're at right now, for an example? Or do you like it better when you're just out and about and doing stuff live, wherever it may be?
You go through different eras with this, I feel like, kind of in a way. Not to steal one from Taylor Swift, but yeah, you do a bunch of shows at home in your studio and you're like, oh, I can't wait to, get back out amongst the variables and the fun of a live show and the chaos of a live show. Then you do a live show and you're like, you know what? Like, that was chaos. Like, I need to get back to when you can control things and kind of have, more of my hands on the dial. So there's pros and cons to each. Ultimately, I mean, if I only was able to do one, I would definitely rather do it in person. I'm kind of a little bit off the walls. I like, when people are giving feedback live. Heck, I love comments, things like that, but there's just nothing replacing with in-person interaction and kind of just that, fun vibe you get going back and forth.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like the margin for error, though, when you do a live show or when you're in person, it's pretty much non-existent. Right now, if one of us were to screw up, I'd be like, yeah, you know what, Zach, no issue. I could just go back and I could edit this before it goes out on YouTube or before, Spotify, Apple on the audio side, whereas the live. But I think knowing that in your mind kind of, I think it's something that you get used to. But you pointed it out. Anything could happen when you're doing a show. Has anything nuts ever happened while you were actually recording a show? Let me give you a real quick story. Something that happened to me not all that long ago at Imperial Pizza. I wonder if something like this ever happened to you. So I've done, man, I'm going to guesstimate 40, maybe even more live shows at this point between Imperial and all the other places that I used to do as well. And I've never had a significant incident happen while the show was being taped or recorded live, whatever you want to call it. But I had Rachel Hotmeyer and Joe Yerdon on both with me. And before we started rolling, there was a table. This was at Imperial Pizza. And there was a table with a family and a little girl. And she unplugged on purpose the extension cord that I have going. Now, the extension cord, obviously, it controls the mixer, the camera's plugged in and stuff like that. So we go up to her before the show. And it's like to the mother, and she's like, you got to be real careful. Please have your daughter be careful. We're about to start taping and doing the live show. Sure enough, about maybe 5-6 minutes into the show, guess who unplugs the extension cord again? That same little girl. So we had to restream and start all over. It was a big disaster. And then at the end of the show, I got a little bit in trouble. I kind of jokingly said, I'm going to strangle you. Ever see a sports media guy strangle a 5-year-old? And they're like, oh, you can't say that. I was like, all right, relax, whatever. Anything ever happened like that to you? Like similar, just like something wild while you were doing a live show? And again, you do not just even sit down shows, man. You're at the stadium all the time, producing content, stuff like that. But anything live? You got any?
I feel like I've experienced every live issue, every live chaos you could possibly think, whether it's a light going off or whether it's the mic not working. But recently we've been kind of smooth sailing. For example, the game day tailgates had really good tech setups and everything, so they made that easy there. But this is just a famous story within the group. This was the Patriots-Eagles Super Bowl. I think it was 2018 or 2019. I think it was 2018, February 2018. We were doing a live show at Giacobbi's on Allen, and this was a family friend, so they hooked us up. This is very early in the Trainwreck tenure, February 2018. And so we do a live show to start the Super Bowl, right before the Super Bowl, like the 8th, Super Bowl pregame show. We're so excited. We're eating free Giacobbi's. We're firing up like the 40 to 50 people that are there. End the show. We're checking the comments because that was what we did. We would literally end the show and we'd run right to check the comments. What did everyone say? I'd never do that nowadays. I can't jettison myself farther away from the content, at least for like right away. Because if you're looking at it right after, you're just going to punish yourself. But yeah, so long story short, because I'm already on a long story. We're at Giacobbi's. We do the pregame show. We're looking at the comments. There's this guy named Rich Stapleton who literally comments, "You guys suck." And we're just like, what? That's unacceptable. So we're like, okay, but it's a comment. We're walking around Giacobbi's. Al walks up to me. He goes, "Rich Stapleton is here. I just saw him at like table 12 in the middle room." I'm like, what? We go check on him. He's there. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go to the halftime show. In the middle of it, we're just going to call Rich Stapleton up to be a part of the show. So that way he can help make it better. We could just be like, "Rich, we needed you here." I go, but no matter what, if somehow it blows up, don't say that he said we suck. Don't let it devolve to the point where we get down to that point. So we're doing the show, and then we're like, okay, come on up, Rich Stapleton. And there's kind of like the crowd goes silent, and we see him at the middle table, and we're like, come on, Rich. We're gesturing over the table. He's like, no, yeah. And then just completely unprovoked, Al just goes, "Come on, Rich, you said we suck. Tell them how to make a better show." And you can the crickets in this place in Giacobbi's during this Patriots-Eagles Super Bowl, whoever the poor performer was, we absolutely stole the show there. But that was just a classic moment. We always talked about Rich Stapleton for like years, even to this day. And that was 5 years ago.
I want to let everybody know who doesn't know this too. I get a lot of people know that I've been doing the show for a while now. I've been doing this for little over 6 years. And there's not a lot of podcasts out there, Buffalo-based, that have been around longer than me. However, this is one of them right there, Trainwreck Sports. I do remember, and I remember this well. Now, you started before I did. I remember because I started doing some research in the fall, earlier part of winter of 2017. And I remember coming across Trainwreck Sports. There was a Buffalo 716 podcast or something like that at the time. And then Rock Power Report. Those were the only ones that I vividly can kind of remember already being around. Anyway, let me ask you this, and we're going to dive into some Bills and Sabres talk in just a few minutes. You were just talking about people leaving comments and not paying. You know what I am noticing now? Because we're starting to grow on the video side. Now, this is still, and always, hopefully, will always be primarily an audio podcast where the majority of the audience is on the audio side, but we're growing the video little brick by brick. Anyway, I'm starting to notice more comments now in the videos, and they're not always good. And I try not to read them.
That's
and
a good thing.
One of them is something like what we're doing right now. And I think some people just don't get it. This is a podcast. It's not a one subject thing. I always sit here, if I have a good guest on, we sit there, we banter, we bullshit a little bit here at the beginning. And let's just say if it was 10 realistic Bills who might get cut, I'll get comments. Go to the 15 minutes or 17 minutes before he finally starts talking about whatever the hell the topic is. That's definitely becoming one of the main criticisms. I guess, like I said, they don't even realize this is a full podcast. But another thing I did want to ask you too, because I just did your show earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be honest with you. It's really weird. And I want to know if you kind of feel the same.
It is kind of weird, isn't it?
No, not doing the show. Now you're doing your show. That wasn't weird, but you're more of an extroverted person. So maybe this will be a different answer for you. But it's, I do these shows all the time, studio, live. I've had some really good guests at, Imperial, wherever I've been. And there's people watching and they're locked in, and I don't ever really get nervous, ever when it's my show. No matter who the guest is, no matter what the audience is, I don't really ever get nervous. But for whatever reason, whenever I go on another show, I kind of get, when I first started this podcast, I used to get butterflies, walk around before any guest. I'd be pacing the house for like an hour. Obviously, don't get like that anymore, but now I do when I'm on someone else's show. Do you think maybe that's because when it's your show, you kind of control the narrative to some extent as opposed to being on the show? Do you feel the same whether you're hosting or whether you're on another show?
Yeah, well, first off, you're exactly right. You feel the comfort that, first off, not only can you control the narrative, some podcasters do that more than others. Obviously, I think we do, a middle of the road job of controlling the narrative on our show. But then, sorry, I'm just losing my track of thought. Sorry. But no, the point being, I literally just completely blanked. I'm sorry. Cue me up again. I literally don't know why. I literally had a good point. My dog was barking.
Maybe it's been a long day for Maniac on Monday. But no, I was asking you just the comfort level of when you have your own show and you bring a guest on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, let's face it. You're on the ones and twos. You're running the ads and everything. You're kind of in control. You also have your audience. And this is what I meant to say. I'm sorry. You're doing, like you said, like episode 200, 300, like we were just talking about the Shout podcast. And then they said they just did their 500th episode from when they started 5 years ago. There's a certain comfort in that number that that even if you have the shittiest podcast ever, you've at least put together like a body of work. There's a certain amount of people following along. And that's kind of like your Cheers. That's kind of like your living room from Roseanne, right? It's like where everyone knows your name. It's where you're comfortable. You go on another podcast, you don't know where people might come from. Like you said, the comments, they might be coming from left and right. You never know who's watching out there. So it's always a little bit more electric. It's always a little bit more, exhilarating in a way, doing, another show versus, your 300th, 400th edition of your own, of course.
One last thing I want to hit up with you, and then we'll dive into the Bills talk here. Trainwreck does, and this is going to be your fifth straight year. We talked a little bit about on your show earlier, the Best of Buffalo bracket. This has become arguably one of maybe even your most popular annual thing at this point. I remember, you put up a poll and people are heavily involved on Twitter X. I mean, thousands of votes in some of these categories. There's some people who are listening or watching this though, and they don't even know what I'm talking about. So look kind of in a condensed style. Tell people what you guys are doing, going into your fifth year of doing this now, the Best of Buffalo bracket.
So, gotcha. Just like any of our content, it's always my favorite idea. How can we take something that already exists, something that's already successful, something that's already proven, and just put a Buffalo spin on it? Buffalonians love Buffalo things more than anything else. So what we did was we put the Best of Buffalo, the Buffalo bracket. At first it was 32 because we were just like, no clue what we were doing, yada, yada. Then we've expanded it to 64 the last 4 years. But the big thing about it is that it's just the Best of Buffalo bracket. So for this past calendar year, since March of last year, what has had the best year in Buffalo? You'll notice certain entities, certain things that maybe a new location, a new store came to Buffalo or things like that. Maybe you'll notice something like, for example, the housing market, in Buffalo, which is booming. I mean, it's obviously not great if you're a buyer, but if you're an owner, obviously you're loving it. So, you might see things it's about aspects of Buffalo. It's about entities of Buffalo. It doesn't necessarily have to be a living, breathing thing. It can often be like lack of traffic or a great place to raise a family. There are certain things about Buffalo that are just great entities and make it a great place to live. And that's what the Buffalo bracket is all about. Getting Buffalonians who love Buffalo stuff fired up about Buffalo things.
It's fun to watch the debates, and I've been in
Oh,
plenty of
yeah.
them myself, and I've seen some people staunchly defend one or the other either way. I can't. There was a Lockport drive-in, and nothing against Lockport drive-in whatsoever, but I remember beefs going on between
Beef
fans
on
of
Weck.
them.
Beef on Weck versus that was almost the first 2-15 upset in the history of that was when we knew the Buffalo bracket was getting serious, because we're like, people are illegally buying votes to vote in the Buffalo bracket. Like, they're not just selling their coworkers and like spamming on other accounts and spamming on other pages. They were literally going back and forth. That was electric. But we've since installed a bracket integrity committee, the BIC, and they monitor all of the polls. So very exciting. And yeah, we're expecting another big year. Got a lot of exciting stuff that we're trying to build it out. In my dream, I would love to do like conference tournaments, like going into the Buffalo bracket, so things can get automatic bids and people get fired up. I think there's a little fatigue when you're doing it that long, and obviously there's the work to go all that. So I would love to expand it. We're going to be doing a bracket reveal show. Maybe we'll work you in somehow, since, like I said, you're the Roger Ebert to the Buffalo bracket to movies to movies.
Who's the defending champion?
Buffalo Chicken Wings, first repeat champion.
First repeat champion, Chicken Wings. And when do you have a date yet? Do you know exactly when you're going to do a reveal and when you're going to get this bracket going?
It is going to be March 18th, Selection Monday. It'll be revealed. Play-ins will basically be starting in the next 24 to 48 hours after that. And then the official tourney gets rolling. We synchronize it up. Listen, we could do it like all weekend or yada, yada. We just do our best to synchronize it up with when the games are actually happening. So when it's the Sweet 16, etc., and there, it's happening in the Buffalo bracket. When it's the Final Four, it's happening in the Buffalo bracket, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't know if this was strategic on your end or not, but a week after free agency starts too, was that strategic, or are we just thinking as it?
No, that's more just no, because it's Selection Sunday, the day before, so we just take it to make our own. But no, that's definitely. I mean, let's face it. If if we're lucky, we're not doing it 3 weeks ago, right? You want to talk about like the cold, hard ground of like Buffalo content. There's really nothing going on, but then you'll have in a week, later this week, you have the trade deadline. And then, like you said, it'll be for the NHL. And then next week, you said it'll be free agency, all kinds of, internet action going on into mid-March, March Madness, and the Buffalo bracket.
Well, on the football side, free agency is getting ready to heat up. It will begin the tampering period, which essentially is free agency, starts actually less than a week from now. This is dropping on Tuesday. Pretty big news day on Monday around the league, actually, not Bills stuff necessarily, but the Denver Broncos cut Russ Wilson. I looked up some numbers. Holy shit. That's got to go down as one of the worst trades in the history of the NFL. They're paying this guy $39 million this year, Zach, to not play for that.
Yeah.
And
it's the David Justice situation from Moneyball.
yeah, it is. It's a good one. They gave up 2 firsts, 2 seconds, some other picks, 3 players.
If you're a Broncos fan, I mean, you as far as like most hated person on the face of the planet, Russell Wilson has to be your number one, right? Because not only did he just harpoon your franchise with this, and again, whether the trade is his fault for the value, etc., that doesn't matter. The guy stunk. He's off your team. You're still paying him for nothing he's doing. He shellacked you in the Super Bowl. So literally it was, and again, it wasn't all Russell Wilson that Super Bowl. Seahawks defense was Legion of Boom ferocious. But if you're a Broncos fan, maybe you were thinking this is the chance for Russell Wilson to rewrite the narrative. He's going to come here. We're going to have a strong defense. He's going to lead us to the Super Bowl just like he does. No, he literally rewrote his legacy as far as how much you must hate him as a Broncos fan.
Now, he's one of the nicest guys, but he is nice to the point. He's nice to the point that it almost doesn't feel authentic. You know what I'm saying? And I'm because he put out a really nice, classy statement today, thanking Denver fans and all these employees. And I didn't say it because it kind of would have been a dick move. But I'm like, yo, if I made $124 million off this team and only going 11-19 as a starter, I say a lot of nice shit on the way out as well. You know this market here in Buffalo, and you know how Bills fans are. For the sake of discussion, not a fun one, but one nonetheless. Let's just say the Bills, Josh Allen didn't work out or whatever, and you go and you get a Russ Wilson, and that lifts your expectations, just like it did in Denver, and he doesn't play that well, and you still have a losing record with him, all that money. Bills Mafia, That would be a tough one, man. The way Russ Wilson, the let's ride and all the nice
Oh,
positivity.
they would be going to Subway, getting a danger witch, and throwing it in the pit. It would be an absolute craziness. I couldn't imagine what it would be if it was Bills fans for sure.
He's gonna have a market though. I guarantee he's still gonna have a market.
Of course, it would be silly not to. I mean, let's face it. I mean, because again, you look at it like you almost forget it all off season, and then it takes the games actually to happen. There's only like 6 to 8 teams that are like truly married and in love with their quarterback.
Sure.
Like there's always a time where if someone came along, someone who did something that they could go, and you forget it all off season until you literally see it on the field. And you just see the difference in the ability of some of these players. But yeah, it's nice to not be in that situation. Regardless of Josh Allen's cap hit, you just never have to worry about the quarterback.
Sure. And there's going to be some teams that are going to take rookie quarterbacks this year, and maybe somebody trades for Justin Fields. But in terms of free agent veterans, Russ Wilson and Kirk Cousins, that's the top of the litter right there. And that's not all that
it's not terrible if you have a team. I mean, again, does it sound like the Broncos a couple of years? A team with weapons, with a good defense. Like it was exactly the situation you're supposed to go into. So it's kind of hard to be like, yeah, that's what you want, because he just kind of had a dream situation. Like that defense was really good. Like that they weren't bad these last couple of years. I know that the end of this year kind of tailed off or whatever, but I just remember the abysmal start to last year and just how it was like an implosion, like basically right up on arrival. That was just unbelievable. The Russ Wilson, that can definitely get its own like mock 30 for 30. Like I said, like the Danger Witch, Broncos country, like the all the times the teammates were just reacting to him on the bench. Like remember there were just times where the teammates were just like, what is this guy even saying? Like, because he was just obviously clearly in his own world. Like you said, $120 million to leave. I would let the entire of Erie County piss on the top of my head for 9 figures. I don't care what I got to do.
It's funny. I think in my mind quickly, because it just happened today, although we knew it was coming. I'm like, what would be a good fit for Russ Wilson? And I'm like, well, Denver would have been a great fit for Russ Wilson. It just seems like that'd be that kind of team. Just didn't work out for him at all. And another piece of news, which I do think, well, it doesn't affect the Bills. It affects my dream of him going to the Bills. And that was Mike Evans, who re-signed with Tampa 2 years, like $52 million, $35 million guaranteed. Big ass deal for somebody who's going to be 31 years old. Got a couple of Bucs fans that lived in Florida for 5 years, and they were telling me the whole time, because I was having pipe dreams about him and in the market, and Brandon Beane swinging something some kind of way to get him in the mix. Because football wise, you were not going to get a better fit, short term at least, for the next couple of years, than if the Bills were to bring in Mike Evans. But I look at it this way. He was never going to go to the Bills, so I actually feel like it's kind of a W that he went back to Tampa, because the Kansas City Chiefs probably would have been on him, and they're not going to get him.
You're right. It's kind of the polar opposite. It's actually completely the polar opposite of JJ Watch. If you remember that whole legacy, where we were reading coded messages off of his Instagram, all kinds of stuff. Ultimately, for him to go to the Cardinals, who at that point, I believe were like 50 or 60 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. Ultimately, I think maybe if he was healthier and, some things went differently in Arizona, it may have been a good fit, but like completely disappointing as a Bills fan to ultimately have him go there versus come to Buffalo. And like you said, with Mike Evans, he's staying with his team, and he's actually not even getting a hometown discount. He's almost getting a hometown overpay. Like you said, like they're paying. So, and another key point, this was a 2-year deal for $52 million. Apparently, he's 2 seasons away, 2 1,000-yard seasons away from breaking Jerry Rice's record for consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. So they're also paying for, I guess, potentially Evans' watch next year as well.
Yeah. On the Bills side, all right, so again, we're a little less now than a week away from free agency. As things stand, as we're recording this late into a Monday evening, the Bills are still like $41 million or so over the cap. Now, they've done a couple smaller things. They restructured Connor McGovern's deal, or kind of moved some money around. They didn't really restructure it. They just redid his deal, and they saved like $3.74 million. And they cut Nyheim Hines over the weekend and save $4.5 million. That kind of was a no-brainer. I like Nyheim Hines. By the way, before we even move on, let's give a nice little shout out to Nyheim Hines. Never did anything wrong, and I'll tell you what, dude, and I know you feel the same way. If nothing else, he provided the Bills one of the most uplifting memories of my lifetime watching this team. Coming back after the Damar Hamlin near tragedy, I should say, running that opening kickoff back against the Patriots. That's got to be one of my top maybe 5 highlights of being a Bills fan in my life. That specific moment, at least.
Yeah, I mean, where does that rank? Like top 5, top 10 Bills moment all time? Like as a floor for sure, like top 10. So at the very least, he provided that. I think if you look back at that game, the Bills actually kind of struggled. So
they did.
Two kickoff returns ended up looming kind of large against that Patriots team that day. Yes, that was unfortunate. Hopefully that doesn't become like this, period of the Bean era where it feels like, you're so close on the pieces, like whether it's Trey White getting hurt, never really being able to play with Von Miller, or in this case, Nyheim Hines being a guy that apparently they were going to get behind as like, a 2 and a passing back going into the year last offseason. And obviously that didn't work out. You hope that this isn't going to be a pattern of things. And obviously at the end of the day, you hope all best for Nyheim Hines and, hopefully he can latch on somewhere.
Yeah, that sucks that he got hurt, but yeah, just $4.5 million is too much for any running back too, especially when you can get a guy like Ty Johnson back probably, or maybe Damian Harris for half that money, maybe even less than half that money. So that was kind of a no-brainer. Anyway, the Bills, they saved about roughly a little over $8 million by those 2 moves. But again, they're still like around $40 million over the cap. Now, Josh Allen's going to get a restructure. That is a 100% slam dunk lock. That's going to free up like $23 million. So that's going to cut down half of what their deficit is. But they're still going to have a lot of work to do. And there's not a lot of time before free agency starts, the tampering period next week. Are you a little bit surprised as we record this late into Monday right now that the Bills haven't done more yet? And are you starting to get, it's coming because it has to come. Are you starting to get a little bit antsy, wondering what it might be?
Yeah, I had mentioned, and again, I hate to be like, when we talked on Trainwreck, et cetera. But, I think that this offseason truly, like you said, last offseason was a bunch of value grabs, got a ton of bargains on 1-year deals, et cetera. I definitely align with you, whereas I think this year is going to be a couple of guys, 2 to 3 on, some 2 to 3 year deals potentially to bridge a gap here, especially with the bigger cap. Am I surprised that they haven't done more? No, only because I look at it from a poker sense, right? Like they have till some date to do this.
Mm-hmm.
If they do it earlier, they're and they clear a ton, they might be kind of signaling, something's going to happen. So, as long as it's done in this window, I mean, it's kind of indifferent. I'm indifferent about it. And I just feel like, I guess everything in this, NFL is a poker, don't show your cards the last thing, whether it comes down to, what quarterback you're starting on, Sunday. We've seen some ridiculous stuff with that. So it doesn't surprise me that he's kind of holding his hand or not showing his hand quite yet.
Well, he is for now, but he's not going to be able to for all that much longer because they're going to have to free up a significant amount of room right now to make things happen. This is going to be the first time, and we talked about this on Trainwreck tonight a little bit anyway. It's going to be the first time since 2018 that Brandon Beane is operating in a different type of way. There's going to be, for the first time, in my opinion, at least anyway, this is going to be the first time in 3, maybe 4 years where there's going to be guys that the Bills want to re-sign, but they can't. Like I think over the last couple of years, that they really, with the exception of Tremaine Edmonds, who got unworldly money, but aside from him, the Bills' own free agents, if they wanted to really re-sign somebody, they got them. You know what I'm saying? If they didn't want to cut somebody, they didn't have to cut them. I think this is going to ultimately be the first time in a handful of years where there's going to be a couple guys that I know Brandon Beane would love to re-sign. He's just not going to be able to. Like AJ Epinesa might be a guy off the top of my head as an example. And I think there's going to be a couple guys that might be surprise cuts that people are not really thinking too much about right now. But this is going to be tough. I mean, you're right about Brandon Beane. It's going to be a difficult year for him because he's going to have to make tough choices.
Pressure's on, and then not like in a hot seat. It's a different kind of pressure.
Right.
You got a picture of the Lombardi up in the practice facility. You know what I mean? You're not like playing to be, a playoff team. You're playing to be a champion. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure on him, and obviously, it's the Von Miller deal is lurking large on the books now. It's not just the Josh Allen deal. So ultimately, hopefully he gets some production for that because it seems like obviously he's not going anywhere this year. But yeah, it's going to take some razzle dazzle. It's going to take, by the way, I love how restructuring just became like so mainstream over the last like 2 to 3 years about just people knowing about it and like talking about it. Not to say like you're Greg Thompsons of the world who are literally like perfect minding, like who's already restructured and everything like that. But it's funny. I just feel like I can just like point away, like, can this guy restructure? Like, okay, restructure. Like Oprah handing out like free cars. I just want everyone to restructure so we can just keep kicking the can down the road because the cap really doesn't exist.
Yeah, and the one thing you learn about restructuring is that it's with players that are going to be around for a while. Like Ed Oliver is going to get restructured.
Yep.
Stephon
he's gonna
Diggs.
be.
Stephon Diggs might now he could be a candidate because if you restructure and you're going to with Josh and Stephon, there's almost your deficit right there. But I'm not 100% sure that they're going to restructure Stephon. It's a tough choice. You want to talk about tough choices that Brandon has to
That's
make.
probably the biggest one that's kind of eclipsed in Bill's, because I haven't seen one post about that the last 2 to 3 weeks. But you're right. That is almost going to be the equivalent of whether a team is picking up a 5th-year option on a player,
right.
is whether they ultimately, because if they don't restructure things, like you're saying, that's absolutely a showing your hand about where you're at with Diggs. You're definitely looking at potentially a 2024 out, a 2025 out.
Yeah,
That's why I'm floating my Marvin Harrison Jr. Trade up scheme, by the way.
Yeah, because if you restructure Stephon and you're kicking money down the road, it's going to be harder to get out of his contract after this year. If you let it play out this year and you decide after this year that you want to get out, it'll be a lot more feasible to be able to do that. Before we take a break, I'm going to name you 3 veterans right now. All right, play a little bit of a
don't do it to me.
3 Bills veterans. Okay, these are 3 people that I think are, I don't want to say shocking cut candidates, but I think they would certainly be surprising cut candidates and certainly well-known players and well-known names. And I'm gonna give you 3 of them. And on a scale from 1 to 10, you tell me what the chances are of them happening. And I'll give you some numbers that go along with them. Number 1 I got is Jordan Poyer. All right. If the Bills were to cut him, they would save $5.7 million and they would eat $2 million of dead cap. You know his age, you know his play level. We know all about Jordan Poyer, the player, the person, this and that. But again, we're talking caponomics to some extent right here. So 1 to 10, what do you think are the chances that they cut him or they just let him play the second year out?
I think the number is just small enough to where you keep him. And this is what, first off, if you're not getting Hyde back, you absolutely keep him, because I don't want to double change out in the safety. I don't want the defense, suffering that kind of turnover. And, there's people who are like, Poyer's play fell off this year. I felt fine with it. I felt fine with the defense last year. I didn't think the defense was ever getting owned at any point in the year, basically, besides when they were playing in the Philly monsoon. So with that said, I'm on a keyboard, and not just because of that, but if Hyde isn't back, you're likely drafting an heir apparent somewhere along the line, right in the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh rounds. And who better than Jordan Poyer? I mean, not just from the experience sense, but I mean, there's like a work ethic with this guy. I mean, yeah, if you look at his Instagram, he posts pictures running on the beach sometimes or whatever. But I've been to training camp, and I'm telling you, nobody does drills on the side like harder, more determined, and crazier than Jordan Poyer. I've been to enough training camps to know, honestly.
I would say I would put it at like about a 3.5.
I'm saying almost a 2.
Yeah, all right. Because I mean, it's not impossible to cut him. I do agree with you though, and I do think Micah Hyde has played his last game with Buffalo. If his career's over or not, that remains to be seen. But I do not think Micah Hyde will be back. I don't think. I'd like to be wrong, by the way, because I'm all for letting these guys run it back one more time. I'd like to see it. I don't think it's going to happen. But anyway, with Jordan Poyer, his contract is significant enough that you can make a nice chunk of savings, but it's also not detrimental enough that you have to get rid of him. I would say if they re-sign Taylor Rapp, then maybe Jordan Poyer could be in trouble. But and also one last thing about him too, I don't think his play fell off at all. I actually think he got stronger as the year went on. If we would have been talking in August, early September, I would have been like, dude might look a little washed. He looked heavy-footed and slow and making mistakes.
I remember that early in the year. Maybe that was what I was playing on. It was distinctly in the beginning of the year. There were some slants, some stuff like
early
that.
On.
He was getting,
but he came out.
Now, I got to say real quick, because I know you're going to give me 2 other players. I almost defer on the defensive side of the ball, because when you bring up Rapp, if McDermott and co thinks Rapp at 3 or 4 million or whatever he's making, I think it's right in that area a year, is better than Poyer for 5.7. I mean, unfortunately, and we haven't used this phrase in a long time, I think I have to trust the process there.
Yeah. Let me give you another guy. I think we'll go to the other side of the ball here. Mitch Morse. The Bills could save $8 million against the cap this year by cutting him, and they would eat $3 million. You could say, he's been a great player, a great leader. That offensive line was the best offensive line under the Josh Allen era. They stayed healthy. They played together all 17 games. Lots of great things to say about Mitch Morse. You can also say, I got Ryan Bates on this roster, a lot cheaper, and Mitch Morse is getting up there. What do you put that number at for him?
A healthy Mitch Morse is beautiful to watch on game film, by the way. And there's something to say, said, McAfee show, right? Like there's only certain guys going on there from the Bills, like Von Miller, Jordan Boyer. Mitch Morse was on there last year during the playoff run. He was on there after the Pittsburgh win target. So that says to the position he holds in the locker room. And this team is just so big on process. I'm going to put it at a flat 5. Let me tell you why. I think there's every reason to move on, like you said with Ryan Bates. I think the $8 million number is big enough to be like, we can, save 5 to 6 or 4 with the Bates contract. With that said, it's just the problem I have with it is, first off, not just the locker room person. I just feel like there's never a center quarterback exchange problem. And
Right.
that's kind of, there's a lot of value in never having a mess up there. So, that's what I was saying. Flat 5.
Not counting the Minnesota game.
Well, that's on Allen, right? Allen clearly had some QB sneak worry issues at that point, and I think he's graduated from them, thankfully. And like any Josh Allen's a champion. He doesn't have a Super Bowl ring or whatever, but he is a champion. He's moved on from that under the gun issue or under the center issue.
I'm going to give him a low score too, and I'm going to cheat a little bit here too, because I'm going to say that I think Brandon Beane's going to exercise some salary cap gymnastics with these guys, where he might give them extensions with voidable years, where maybe they get more money or whatever now, and you could make their cap hit for 2024 lower. So you're not, I don't think, what is it? I don't even know what the numbers are in front of me, but they're both pretty significant, Morris and Poyer. But if you can get those numbers down, there's no reason to want to move on from them. And then the last guy here, this one's a lot tougher. Trey White.
No. I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
The finances say you absolutely should get rid of him. But, and I don't even know the rule, to be honest with you right now. I don't know if the Bills, like if they wanted to cut him tomorrow morning, I don't know that they can because he's still injured. At some point, I know they'd be able to. But anyway, is Trey White going to be a Buffalo Bill week 1, September 2024?
Yeah, when you grow up, like when you're a kid and you see like someone come back, oh, that's like part of this. Like that's kind of like sad that like no matter what, they kind of have to wait till he's fully recovered to like have any potential breakup. This is something. I mean, you talk about Poyer, you talk about Morse. Like, yeah, those aren't breakups you would want to have, but I don't think you would be like, heartbroken, crying in your room, lights off, like light rain outside the window pane type like situation. But that's absolutely what it would be with Trey White.
Yeah.
The fans, the locker room, the team, the vibe. I mean, this was, that's like that. And I kind of look at Poyer similarly. That was when the Bills started to turn around. That was when, the defense stopped being a joke, like almost full time. That was when the Bills organization kind of started being winners, overall. Yeah, at the end of the day, that's why this is the NFL, right? Like the Belichick Patriots, like, the Patriot way wasn't always right. A lot of it was bullshit. But the ability to move on from aging vets who you were overpaying and kind of move on just early enough to where they didn't really sting you was really like a trademark of what the good they were able to do as a franchise. So I'm going to put it as a 7 just because I think it's super possible. I'm fingers crossed that maybe there can be some kind of like, renegotiation, not a restructure, because you can't kick him like way down the line, but I don't know. It's a 7 and I'm not happy about it.
I think a lot of fans are going to see the ugly business side of football when it comes to this decision. I don't think he's going to be back. I would even say it's maybe an 8.5, maybe even a 9 because of A, the money, B, the injuries, plural, not singular. And last but not least, you also got the fact that they got Rasul Douglas and they got Christian Benford. Benford was great last year. He's a legit number 2 corner on a cheap ass rookie deal. And you still got Kyle Elam in the mix as a potential. Maybe he's your Dane Jackson next year. He's your third guy. It's just a lot of money for Trey. I hate to say it, but I could see him gone. I think, and they should find a way to keep Morris and Poyer, whether it's letting them play out their contracts, whether it's moving some money around, whatever they got to do. I'll tell you what, I'm going to take a real quick break. Come back, more Bills and Sabres talk with my man Maniac. All right, I'm back here with Maniac from Trainwreck Sports. One more Bills point, too, and then we'll talk a few minutes with Sabres before we get out of here. This is also going to be a year, we're just talking about their own guys and having decisions to make. To me, the strength of the Bills last year was their depth. That roster, I think, was their best roster during this entire Brandon Beane era. Not maybe so much top heavy, but just the depth on this team was just so good because you lose a guy like Milano. And look, Tyrell Dodson he's not Matt Milano, but that position didn't fall off a cliff. Tyrell Dodson did a lot of good things. Trey White gets hurt. Benford holds it down. Dane Jackson holds it down. They trade for Rasul Douglas. Dawson Knox is the starter to begin the year. We always knew Delta Kincaid was going to do good things, but Knox gets hurt. That position was actually got upgraded once Dawson Knox got hurt. Vaughn Miller came back and was washed up at least this past year. We'll see what happens going forward, but who cares? Because Leonard Floyd had 10.5 sacks. You know what I'm saying? Like Taylor Rapp did a good job at times playing that safety position in that dime defense. David Edwards, a hell of a 6 offensive lineman. He had the highest run blocking grade per PFF of anybody on the football team. You're not going to be able to go out and get all those types of guys this year, as backups, as depth. I think that's where this team might hurt the most. I think when you gloss over the Buffalo Bills, national people, they're going to see that 20 starters are back. There's nothing wrong with this football team. But when you get underneath the hood a little bit, Maniac, this is where I think you're going to see a lot of rookies and unproven guys in the depth positions.
Yeah, you're going to need something to step up. Now, the one kind of twist you get on all of it is you're also getting back Matt Milano. Now, is he going to be 100% right at the beginning of the year? Who knows off the injury? That's almost like, an A-plus free agent addition that we essentially didn't have last year.
Right.
So everything hopefully will be alleviated, made a little easier amongst that. And at the end of the day, it sounds silly to say, and it sounds like almost cultish. But it's like you have to trust the process because, I think about it a year and a half, 2 years ago. Yes, people were whispering about Terrell Bernard. They were like, this could be the next guy. This could be the guy in waiting. The way he stepped in and took over at that linebacker position last year, doing things on a historic level. I just don't think any Bills fan expected that going in. So it's like I don't look at this period like let's get unbelievably worked up about what's happening because I feel like it's kind of almost like putty, almost like Play-Doh, like the way they're putting it together. And yeah, ultimately, will all these pieces fit together? I think they'll find a way.
I've had a trillion terrible takes, and I'm going to tell you right now, my takes on Terrell Bernard over the summer and in training camp and the preseason will always rank really high among my worst because I thought that dude sucked. I thought it was a joke that it was him and Tyrell Dodson. They had months to address Tremaine Evans leaving, and this is what they come up with? Are you kidding me? And Terrell Bernard is literally a star, and Tyrell Dodson was a hell of a solid role player for this team. Just horrible takes. Real quick, before we get to any Sabres shit here, and I already talked about this a little bit on your show. I'm going to just gloss over this on my end because I'll be talking about this ad nauseum for the next few weeks. But my wish list, my realistic wish list is to re-sign DeQuan Jones and the 2 free agents that I'd really like the Bills to target is wide receiver Noah Brown from Houston and then the safety Geno Stone from the Baltimore Ravens. I think those are 2 kind of plug-and-play starters for now, and maybe you improve at the draft. I'd also like to see Cam Lewis and David Edwards get re-signed. I think they're really good role players for the Bills too. But that's my realistic wish list. Going into free agency starting next week, you don't even necessarily maybe have to say specific players, but what's your goal? What do you want to see the Bills accomplish that's realistic before the draft?
I think that one thing the Bills can accomplish that's realistic before the draft that would make me pleased is to sign Odell Beckham Jr. to a 2-year, $21 million incentive-laden deal. He wants to win a Super Bowl. He thinks he got a bad spin in Baltimore. He thinks he didn't get thrown to. He thinks he was playing well. I think a lot of the film supports that. If you look at a lot of the film people. So there are throws that Josh Allen can make that Lamar can't make. And there's a reason, Bills fans were having upheaval over the MVP last year. It wasn't just the stats. It was the ability to play and the ability to win. I think that Odell Beckham sees that in Buffalo. And I have to sprinkle this to the end, Pat. How great would it be to get Kim Kardashian to Orchard Park? Come
on. Well, I'll put it this way. If you want a shot at Beckham, then you're going to be saying goodbye to maybe Poyer or Mitch Morse or maybe even both of them to be able to come up with that kind of. Well, actually, who knows? You never know. Again, the salary cap can be so fickle and so weird. We'll see how it plays out, man. It's going to be fun. This is going to be an interesting offseason for different reasons. Like last year, I felt anything was possible. This year, it's keep this team intact and just replace what you're going to lose because this is a team right there, at the top of the conference. They're as good as anybody in this conference. Now, they can also miss the playoffs next year, too, if things don't go right. Worried about the depth. Like I said, the role players, they were able to withstand a lot of injuries this year. I'm not sure they're going to be able to sign those veterans this time around.
It's just weird. You look at it, I mean, I really think that there's an underlying current that the average fan doesn't recognize, in that likely Von Miller is going to be better next year. I mean, you just got to think he's going to be better. He was kind of peaking at the end of last year. So you got to think, if you get like a 80% Von Miller and you get a Matt Milano added back to this defense, you re-sign Daquan Jones, you really don't need to move like hell, heaven, and earth or whatever to be a top 5 defense again.
Nope, I completely agree, and you're right about Von Miller. I thought he was far and away their best defensive lineman against the Chiefs in the playoffs, which is, that's a pretty low bar.
Yeah, he was getting some pressures. By the way, real quick, I want to speaking of the Chiefs, I want to put you to the test. Terrell Bernard plays that Chiefs game. Do the Bills win?
Yes. Yep.
It was really a massive mismatch. Not a absolutely homer. Terrorized us on.
I've said this on my show. I don't think it's a homer take either. I'm being completely honest and objective. I truly, truly, truly think that if Bernard is healthy and he doesn't hurt his ankle against or his knee, whatever, against Pittsburgh, I think the Bills win. The difference between him and AJ Klein is it's almost unspeakable.
And again, it's not just like one or two plays. It was a mismatch. They were putting the thumb on a wound, like when they were going after him. So I just think that they wouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah, me too, 100%. All right, I only got a couple minutes of Sabres talk in me because I just get
Let's cook.
Team. They're 10 points out, 20 games left. You pointed this out on your show earlier. I didn't even know that they're 2% to make the playoffs. I thought they were 1%, quite frankly. 2 parts. There's 2 things I want to ask you. One, is Don Granato, do you think he's on the hot seat? Should he be on the hot seat? Is he coaching for his job over these last 20 games? And should he be coaching for his job over these last 20 games? What do you think when it comes to him?
Is he coaching for his job over the last 20 games, and is he on the hot seat? No, unless the Sabres are literally going to sign Lindy Ruff as a home play, which would be amazing. But I do not think so. Besides that, should he be coaching these last 20 games like his job is on the line? Absolutely. And should he feel like he's on the hot seat? Absolutely. Because this team had just massive expectations going into this year. Yes, there were injuries. Yes, there were fallbacks on the offensive side of things. But the most frustrating thing to me as a fan was just that first half of the season, and it didn't even go away until like mid-February. Just so many slow starts and so many slow starts at home. And you just have to think that at the end of the day, getting these guys ready to play, getting them in the mindset to come out gunning at the 20-minute mark of the first period, that's part of the coaching. That's part of head coach. So I feel like because of that, yeah, he should feel a little bit on the hot seat. Ultimately, I don't think they're moving on from him. And I do think maybe one more year might be okay for Granato.
Kevin Adams, for what it's worth, for people who don't know, on Saturday over the weekend said that he definitely wants Don Granato to be back. That could change, though. I mean, what a GM says with 20 games left in the season, that's always, that's fluid, and that could always change. And, we said it, we were kind of on Trainwreck. We were kind of throwing it around and laughing a little bit about Lindy Ruff getting fired, who did get fired today by the New Jersey Devils. But I think it's Terry Bagula, and we all know what a Sabres fan he is, since he's bought this team, and he's not hid from that. And you get a guy like Lindy Ruff available, you got to wonder, man, is it a possibility that if they were to move on from Don Granato, I can promise you Lindy Ruff is going to be on his short list.
Yeah, well, that's for certain. That's not even a question. My other question would be, and I've been thinking about this since you mentioned it. It's 100% a Pegula play that makes sense to this. Does he have too much hubris to admit the mistake in firing him originally? I don't even know if it was a mistake, but I just remember that like the team was in a state of flux and tumult where it was just like, you can't fire the team, you got to fire the coach. But do you think that Pegula might have a little too much to admit that mistake?
Maybe, probably. And he also,
billionaires tend to have a little hubris.
Yeah, they do. And he did get an extension that hasn't even kicked in yet. That makes me the biggest reason why I think that he's not going to get fired at the end of this season. Yeah, that's a lot of money to eat for a guy who's not even coached one game of an extension. I could see them going in the next season. If they get off to a shitty start, then he gets fired maybe early in the year. But now you're risking going yet another season without making the playoffs because you get into a shitty start. It's really frustrating the way they played at home. It's got to be coaching. And I've fought with Harrington and all these other media people. They're the players. And it is the players to an extent. But it's also the coach. They're coming out flat. And, they're falling in multiple goal holes at home in the first period. They don't score for half the freaking games, and till the games are halfway over.
Up until this past Sunday, I think it was Mike Harrington who said it. The last 2 seasons, they were, I believe, 46-0-5 when leading after 1. So it's like essentially like they're a good team, or 1 or 2. I forget what it is, but regardless,
2, but still.
is that when they get out front, when they get in front, they're not their issue, their stigma the last 2 years has not been they're blowing leads when they're in front. It's been that they can't get out the gate and they fall behind.
Yeah, and by the way, for everybody,
and you're right. That is coaching, though. That is at the end of the day, that's coaching. I'm sorry, the players aren't coming out every day sleepy after they walk in with their fresh fits. They're getting posted on Instagram. Like, that's coaching.
And I'm going to have Mike Harrington on the show tomorrow, by the way, for everybody watching and listening. I'm definitely going to ask him some questions about this team at home, and I'm hoping and I expect for him to give me some pretty candid answers. One more Sabres thing here. So you look into the future and the prospects. You got a really good prospect pool. You got Savoy, Kulik, and Rosine. Let's just even stick with those 3 and not even talk about the others. I look at this roster. There's got to be changes for these guys to get in the lineup, because you do the math. So you get the Tage line, Tage, Skinner, Tuck. That's 3. Cousins, Paterka, Quinn. That's 6. Middlestat, Benson. That's 8 of your top 9 right there. And you can't have guys like Rosine and Savoy aren't coming to Buffalo eventually to be 4th line guys. You can move Greenway down. So I count Greenway and Krebs, even if you
unless you want him to be back in Rochester in a couple weeks.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, you almost feel like if these guys are going to be coming up, and they should be ready next year, Savoy and Kulik, I would say almost for sure, you got to move somebody. You got to do something, because you can't have these guys playing on the 4th line. Zach Benson's not a 4th liner. Greenway can play the 4th line, but I see, Poso will be gone, Gergensen will be gone, so there's going to be 2 to 3 forward spots. But you got to go.
That's the big thing right away.
You got to get 4th line guys, though.
Could you see a potential youth is served final to the season here if they somehow get rid of Okposo, which is a lot of buzz picking up around his name? I mean, I don't know if you could get rid of Gergensen. I feel like he's kind of just stapled to the Sabres at this point. But if you get rid of him, you'll be able to call one of them up right away at least.
Yeah, but again, who's going to play that 4th line? That's the thing. Well, you got Greenway and Krebs.
Move Eric Robinson down. Move Eric Robinson down.
Well, then you got to get somebody out of the lineup. I'm not even so much these last handful of games. Like, Aaron Robinson might not be back next year, but it's like you got to have, maybe he will. Because my point is, you got to have 4th line guys. You can't have 12 smaller.
You do. At the end of the day, and you can't just be like, I'm going to put like my sleeper sexy guys on the 4th line and see if they can all score 20 goals. It just doesn't work that way.
Before we get out of here, only because I put it on the billboard, and so now I can't advertise wrestling.
We got to. You can't avoid it. You can't be a fake ad.
Talk a little bit of wrestling. We were talking on Twitter and then on your show. AEW had the Revolution pay-per-view on Sunday, and I admittedly am not a big AEW guy. My general attitude towards it is the wrestlers are great. The matches are great. I just don't think there's enough stories. I think the booking is really erratic and just often weird. So it's really hard for me to latch into it. But I do enjoy watching the matches. When I do watch, I watched on Sunday night literally because Sting was having his retirement match. And oh my God, dude, that was and I know we talked about this on your show earlier, but what a great show that was. And what a great way for Sting to go out. What a great performance. A couple great spots. Just getting fired up. It was a lot of fun, man. That's what wrestling was supposed to be. I had a lot of fun watching AEW on Sunday.
It's no secret, unfortunately, that while WWE is absolutely thriving for their live events, AEW is actually struggling a little bit. They're averaging, like in some spots, like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 fans at these arenas that obviously have room for 15, 16, 17,000. So you hate to see that. But at the same time, I think they had 17 to 18,000 in the house last night for Sting's retirement match. And you're right. They absolutely delivered with that AEW Revolution pay-per-view. How could you not love that, seeing it? I think they are working a little bit better on the storytelling. The tough thing for AEW, Pat, I'll just give the quickest rundown I can. They were so much head of steam in 2021. They were arguably a better product than WWE if you were 18 to 34. Just so much more respect for like an adult audience, things like that. The storytelling was good. It wasn't as gimmicky storytelling, like with overt shticks and things like that sometimes happen in the WWE. And I say that lovingly. I love the WWE. But it was just a little bit more focused towards the adult and everything. They were cooking. Then they got CM Punk, and you thought like they're at the top of the world. They got the wrestler I was talking about. That was a disaster at the end of the day, whether it was through Punk's own actions, whether it was through the injuries. They've also had some other injuries to their stars. Kenny Omega wasn't on the pay-per-view last night. There's talk that, he might not even wrestle again. I don't want to start anything else, but there's just a lot of wondering what's going on there. They're finally getting back in their groove. And like you said, they had a great show last night. And I got to ask you too, what about my girl, Timeless Toni Storm? You don't like that shtick?
I love it. She's my favorite.
That was amazing. Okay. So I'm she's my top two. Literally, I like her and Swerve Strickland.
Did you watch the press conference? Did you watch the scrum after the pay-per-view?
I did not watch her scrum. Was it amazing? It was as always. Okay.
She was awesome.
I'm telling you, Pat, go back and just watch the highlights because she there's a reason they put the title on her like almost right after she started doing this shtick. Everyone knew it was electric. And the way, she's doing things. She's stretching like, what you can say on cable. Like, I'm just going to say this to your listeners. Like, if you're under PG-13, like, I guess close your ears or whatever. She said she was going to punch another woman in the box. Like, literally. Like, and everyone just broke out laughing. Like, again, like, is that normally something you see on cable? Absolutely not. That's what makes wrestling electric. That's what makes it amazing to watch.
Yeah, her character is as good as any female right now in WWE, except, well, we talked about Tiffy Time a little bit on your show. It's my girl.
I give Rhea a little shtick over her because Rhea is literally heading up a faction of all men, and she's the figurehead for all men. That really has never been done in wrestling before. For a female competitor to do that.
That match that her and Charlotte had last year is one of the better matches that I've seen, period, male or female, in a very long time. One other thing about AEW too. So I tweeted this out Sunday, and I kind of got beat up a little bit for it, and it was fair to get beat up. Will Ospreay, I was so impressed by him, and I tweeted, man, it's such a shitty shame that he didn't go to sign with WWE. He'd be such a big star, and people jumped on me almost immediately, and they said, which was accurate, he wouldn't be doing 70% of the shit.
That's exactly why you can't have Ospreay in WWE. He would be doing a super safe moveset. It would still be electric. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure he would find a way to be super successful. But like you said also, WWE, sometimes you need to be able to talk for like 10, 15 minutes on the microphone. He can cut a promo. I love Ospreay, but I wouldn't say it's his strength, bruv. Right. You know what I mean? He's a little bit shorter on the mic there as far as I'm concerned. But the moveset, the physical ability, what you were seeing in the ring, that match between him and Takeshita was amazing.
Yeah, and I just think of some of the great matches he'll have there. And like I said, I fantasize about some of the matches he could have potentially had in WWE. And speaking of, last question here, I'm going to put you out of spot a little bit. So WrestleMania is coming up here, and we'll skip through all the other stuff. And I know there's a lot of good shit going on with WWE, but let's get to the main event, night 2. At the end of the match, it's Cody Rhodes, it's Roman Reigns. How do you see,
is it bloodline rules or bloodline ban from ringside?
It depends on what you think is going to happen at the end of night 1. I personally think the bloodline's going to win on night 1. So I suppose it'll be bloodline rules. How do you see the end of WrestleMania 2 ending?
I see it ending ultimately. It's like, it's like.
It's tough, I think. I think it's tough.
What? Did you ever see the movie Black Widow? MCU?
Yeah, with Scarlett Johansson.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, she goes to shoot the guy at the end, but she can't harm him because she's got the pheromones like built in. Like, that is how I feel trying to pick against Roman Reigns in this era. We run a WWE show. These guys have picked against Roman Reigns so many times. Every time they pick against him, I go, I'm just going to pick Roman Reigns because it's basically betting on like a minus 300, a minus 400. But with that said, I think WWE is smart enough. Right now is absolutely the moment to pull the trigger. Bloodline Civil War, have it all fall apart on night 2, have Roman's empire start to collapse, start the story with Cody.
How?
This is exactly what we got.
Who
Bloodline rules. It's going to be Bloodline rules, and at some point, The Rock is either going to stop Solo and Jimmy Uso from interfering, or he's going to unintentionally hit like Roman or something like that. It'll be one of the two. I'm leaning more towards him actually stopping Jimmy and Solo, saying like, let the head of the table handle his business or something, which will ultimately cue Rock versus Roman for potentially a SummerSlam or a WrestleMania. That's how I see it going down. The Rock interferes with the Bloodline's typical interference. Cody gets the win. I don't think they want to do The Rock hitting Roman by accident because that kind of devalues Cody's win. I think
Mhm.
they're gonna have Rock somehow tell like Jimmy and Solo like no Oos, like no interference at like this point or something. And because the Rock's promo last week was amazing. He was saying bloodline rules meant like Solo could be like singing the national anthem. Paul Heyman could come in with a foreign object. It was ridiculous.
I have 3 theories real quick, and I want to be real clear
Okay.
because I want Roman Reigns to win. I don't want Cody to ever finish the story. I want him to keep going back to WrestleMania year after year. I'm just a Roman Reigns guy. I love it. I don't give a shit that he's part-time. Actually makes me like him even more, man. I love the gimmick. I just love his attitude. I think this is perfect for him. But I can see 3 things happening. They all result in Cody Rhodes winning. I do think Cody Rhodes is walking out of WrestleMania as champ. And as much as I personally hate it, I see why. It makes perfect sense. I could see The Rock in a heel way turning on Roman Reigns, like maybe hitting him in the nuts or something like that. That looks like he's clearly a heel. Like, oh my God, what is he doing? And then The Rock has that grin, that devilish grin. He's the leader. He's the head of the table, and he's going to screw Roman over in that way. That's 1. 2, I agree with you about him stopping the bloodline from interfering, and he leaves WrestleMania as a babyface, which is ultimately what he's going to end up being at the end of the day anyway, The Rock, even though he's doing some great heel work right now. Or 3, he's joining the bloodline and they're screwing over Cody, and then that glass shatters and it's Stone Cold that comes out and takes it to The Rock. Maybe Jey Uso comes out too or whatever, but Stone Cold ultimately comes out, and it's Stone Cold gets his moment with The Rock. He hits a stunner on The Rock. And then, afterwards, Roman Reigns will blame The Rock because he lost because of all this shit going on with Stone Cold. And then that leads to ultimately, there might be a little bit of fantasy booking, but I don't think that's like completely out of the question.
Oh, I'm fantasizing right now about that 2-minute and 30-second YouTube video of Stone Cold Steve Austin entering during the main event of WrestleMania 40. That glass shattering would send Philly into a frenzy.
Absolutely, man. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Make sure you follow Zach on Twitter at Zach Sheldon. Of course, check out Trainwreck Sports, a whole roster of shows, man. This was fun. Been a long time since I had you on. I appreciate you, and I look forward to following the Buffalo bracket. I'm sure I'll be talking about it, whether it's something I like or whether it's something I don't like a bracket or whatever. I'm sure I'll be talking about it on this show, man. Thank you very much.
Dude, always a good chat. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, I'll be back with a new show. Mike Harrington joins me tomorrow.